The original case and conviction. Lucy Letby, a neonatal nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital in the United Kingdom, was convicted between 2023 and 2024 of murdering 7 newborn babies and attempting to murder several others in what became one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent British history. The prosecution alleged that Letby intentionally harmed vulnerable infants in her care by injecting air into their bloodstreams, administering insulin to cause dangerous drops in blood sugar, and tampering with feeding tubes to induce sudden collapses. The case against her was built on a combination of medical evidence, forensic analysis, and circumstantial patterns, particularly the fact that a significant number of these unexplained collapses and deaths occurred during her shifts. Expert witnesses testified that the clinical episodes could not be explained by natural causes or standard complications in premature infants, while the prosecution pointed to Letby's presence as the common factor in these events. In light of the cumulative evidence, the jury found her guilty and she was handed a whole life sentence, the most severe punishment under UK law, meaning she will remain in prison for the rest of her life with no possibility of release. Key evidence used at trial. The prosecution's case against Lucy Letby was built on several key elements, including medical and forensic evidence, expert analysis, and circumstantial findings. Central to their argument was the claim that some of the babies had been deliberately poisoned with insulin, which was supported by blood test results indicating abnormally low blood sugar levels that could not be medically explained. In addition to suspected insulin poisoning, the prosecution highlighted a series of sudden and unusual medical collapses among infants, many of which occurred without any clear clinical cause. Expert witnesses were brought in to interpret post-mortem reports and blood work, suggesting that these events were not natural and likely involved external interference. Another significant part of the case was the pattern of Letby being consistently present during each unexplained collapse or death, reinforcing suspicions that her presence was more than coincidental. The prosecution also presented handwritten notes found in Letby's home, including one in which she had written, "I am evil, I did this," which they argued was a clear admission of guilt. However, this note has been a point of contention, with the defense arguing that it reflected emotional turmoil or mental distress rather than a confession. Emergence of new medical doubts. In 2025, a panel of 14 senior medical experts released a comprehensive report that raised serious doubts about the foundation of Lucy Letby's conviction. After reviewing the medical records and case details of all the infants involved, the experts concluded that there was no clear or definitive medical evidence to prove deliberate harm had been inflicted. Their analysis suggested that many of the deaths and collapses could be explained by natural causes, such as infections, congenital conditions, or the inherent vulnerability of premature and critically ill newborns. Additionally, they highlighted concerns about the quality of hospital care at the time, pointing to possible delays in treatment, staff shortages, and systemic failures that may have contributed to the outcomes. The panel was particularly critical of the interpretations made by prosecution experts, especially regarding claims that the babies died due to air embolisms or insulin poisoning. They argued that the evidence for these causes was either inconclusive or based on flawed assumptions, and that alternative medical explanations had not been fully considered during the trial. Reliability of forensic testing under scrutiny. One major point of controversy in the Lucy Letby case centers on the insulin tests that were used as critical evidence in the prosecution's argument. According to the defense's newly assembled panel of medical experts, this has led to broader concerns about whether the scientific evidence presented at trial met the standard required for such a serious conviction. Questionable use of statistical evidence. Another major point of debate in the Lucy Letby case concerns the statistical evidence used to connect her to the series of infant collapses and deaths. The prosecution argued that it was highly suspicious that a disproportionate number of these critical incidents occurred while Letby was on duty, presenting this pattern as strong circumstantial evidence of her involvement. However, this reasoning has been heavily criticized by several statisticians and legal experts who warn that it may be an example of the prosecutor's fallacy. As a result, they question whether this line of argument should have played such a significant role in securing Letby's conviction. Procedural errors and appeals. Following Lucy Letby's initial conviction, several procedural concerns emerged that cast doubt on the reliability and handling of the evidence used during the trial. One notable issue involved the hospital's electronic swipe card data, which tracks when staff members enter and exit specific areas of the neonatal unit. During the first trial, some of this data was incorrectly labeled and presented in a way that misrepresented Letby's movements in and out of the ward. This information was used to support the timeline of certain incidents and was considered significant in placing her at the scene during key moments. The Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, later acknowledged the error and made corrections during a retrial. Defense's current push for appeal. Letby's legal team has formally submitted new evidence to the UK's Criminal Cases Review Commission, the independent body responsible for investigating potential miscarriages of justice. In their submission, the defense argues that significant flaws have emerged in the original case, particularly in relation to the medical and statistical evidence used to secure her conviction. They highlight recent expert testimony from leading neonatologists, forensic specialists, and statisticians who question the validity of the insulin test results, the interpretation of cause of death in several cases, and the reliability of the statistical reasoning that linked Letby to the incidents. Ongoing public inquiry. A public inquiry, called the Thirlwall Inquiry, is currently underway to investigate how the hospital's management and relevant regulatory bodies handled the situation leading up to Lucy Letby's arrest. The inquiry's primary focus is to determine whether hospital executives and senior staff failed to respond adequately to early warning signs and concerns raised by medical professionals about Letby's conduct. It seeks to uncover if institutional shortcomings or systemic failures within the hospital environment allowed the alleged harm to continue unchecked for a prolonged period. Divided public opinion. The Lucy Letby case has deeply divided public opinion both within the UK and internationally. Many people believe that the conviction was justified and supported by compelling evidence, especially the heartfelt and emotional testimonies from the families of the babies who died or were harmed. For these supporters, the verdict represents justice for the victims and their loved ones. However, there is a significant portion of the public and experts who question the fairness of the trial. What's at stake going forward? If Lucy Letby's conviction is eventually overturned, it could trigger profound and far-reaching changes in how expert testimony, forensic science, and statistical evidence are used and evaluated in criminal trials. Such a decision would likely prompt courts to adopt stricter standards for the scientific and medical evidence presented. Conversely, if Letby's convictions are upheld despite the challenges and new evidence presented, it would reinforce public and professional confidence in the original trial's fairness and the legal system's ability to handle complex medical cases accurately. In either outcome, the case is set to leave a lasting impact on both medical jurisprudence and hospital governance in the UK. Thanks for watching and subscribing channel